The title of our webinar today is Why Data Collection is Good for Your Network Health. I am your sidekick, Stu Goomans. I'm joined by the lovely, my host, Tawny. Why don't you take it away?
You crack me up with that, Stu, like every time. Yes, thank you, everybody. We were really excited to kick off 2021 here with some amazing guests. I'm actually going to let them introduce themselves. Mac, we'll start with you. Uh, Tell us about you.
Cool. Hello, everyone. I'm Mac. I work at Natilic as a Wi-Fi engineer. Surprise. So I pretty much do Wi-Fi. Okay, day in, day out, all the time. I even have dreams about Wi-Fi. And also, you might know me as the Wi-Fi Ninja that I host together with Matt Starling. And I'm extremely honored and super happy to be here with everyone. So thank you very much, Tony. Thank you very much, Stu, for having me. It's a massive, massive pleasure.
Oh, it's our pleasure. We're excited to have you, Mac. And Dale.
Hi, I'm Dale Tyler, a network engineer for a global specialty retailer that's based in the United States. I have a particular and special focus on Wi-Fi.
Awesome. Wi-Fi, it makes the world go round, right? Especially in a pandemic, when you think about what's happening, it's connecting everyone in our world. It's such an awesome thing. But before we get started today, we're going to do things a little out of order. We are going to launch right into our first poll today. And so our question, how often should a survey be performed to validate and collect data on the network? And Mac and Dale, you guys can answer. So should it be done weekly, monthly, quarterly, yearly, or I never validate my network? And Stu, where is my Jeopardy music? You're killing me with
Well,
that,
no, I
Stu.
just didn't want to
Oh, there we go.
kind of interrupt you on that one, right? So you had a really good thought you were going on. Yeah.
All right.
Well, look
As
at that. We're almost, everybody's answering the question. This is good. We're getting there.
Yeah, it's
We're
really
almost.
good. Yes, give it just another second.
Yeah, we'll let him in there.
Yeah.
I know we
All
can't answer,
right.
but if it was never, then we wouldn't have
She
the.
closed the poll. We
Well,
had a
and
lot
so
more
this is
participants getting ready to
yeah.
answer that one.
And so looking at the answers, most folks said quarterly. Most folks said they do it on a quarterly basis. So, that's an interesting thought, because we think about how important that data is to our network, and it's critical. I mean, Dale, talk about, you said you're working for a global retailer. Why is understanding what's happening and collecting data in the stores and in the corporate environment, why is that so important to your network?
Yeah, so really it's important because a lot of times the applications, mobile applications at that, are
Mm-hmm.
important. For the employees or the end users, but also for any customers in stores that utilize the Wi-Fi network. You want to have a good experience for both sides. So collecting that data helps you fine tune things and better ensure a good experience for all.
Mm-hmm. And Mac, what about you? I mean, you have a different perspective.
Well, I agree with Dale, but
Well, yes.
collecting data, it gives you like an insight into what is happening in your Wi-Fi network. So even if you think everything is fine, that's
Mm-hmm.
great. But if it's not, then you will hear from your users very quickly about it. And by collecting data, you will know exactly what is happening in your network.
Mm-hmm.
So servers, they don't lie. You just capture the information, you walk around and you know what is happening from the physical perspective. So I think it's extremely important to understand what you could improve.
Yeah, and to Keith's point, I mean, it's hard, especially when you work for a VAR or a different organization that you're servicing multiple customers. It does become challenging helping the customer understand why it's so important. But hopefully today we can get some tips and tricks on and help you to communicate the importance of data collection and why that matters. In the past we did it was such a cumbersome process. I never have had been a part of that. I came in after technology had advanced. But Stu, what was it like doing surveys way back when? Because
It
Stu is
was an
so old.
experience. Yeah, thanks. It was an experience. We used to use a lot of tools. We had like attenuators. We would put on antennas and stuff on poles. This is back in the old days when like air magnet was not even coming out. Did I just say another brand? An old tool. But I mean, it's well before there was any tools on the market. This was all a manual process. We'd throw an AP up and do some measurements to figure out if it was doing, and it was such a, like, a lot of notepad, paper and pen.
Mm-hmm.
in some cases. And then it started to evolve quickly. We started looking at spectrum analysis a little bit better with
Mm-hmm.
cards such as the old, well, the brand doesn't exist, Cognos, so I can say that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah. Well, this is before them. This is way before. This is back in the old days, right? So there was a lot of. It was a very interesting time, put it that way. And we called
Mm-hmm.
it. I think we've called it often the Wild West days of wireless analysis.
Yeah. And I think one of the things, especially us here at Ekahau, one of the things that we focused on was the accuracy and consistency of data collection for surveys. We know that dongles aren't as reliable, but with the modern age and how everything is advanced, tools have come a long way for us. And so the process of collecting the data is a lot simpler for the actual process. Now we understand, there's a lot of things associated with that with customers and everything else, but the process has become a lot simpler for everybody to collect the data, to share, and to understand what's happening on your network. And so one of the things that we like to talk about and to help simplify it is the autopilot. For those of you who have the iPad or iPhone app for survey, autopilot really helps streamline some of the efficiencies with data collection. So we're going to run and show what an autopilot survey looks like. And Stu, tell us what happens with autopilot.
So one of the cool things with that is that we're leveraging the tools like the AR kit, right? And we're also leveraging that are built into the iOS device, and also which is new this year, the LiDAR capabilities.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we're doing here is we're taking that spatial awareness, understanding where we are. We click in 2 locations only. We have to click our start, move a few meters, and click again, and then it just starts to map out where you are, and it's giving that sense of, hey, I can just click and move around, right? And as long as your map and scale is perfectly fine, you're ready to go, right? So it makes it a lot easier than, and I can keep my eyes on the road, right? So that's where
Mm-hmm.
I've always found it a much easier process and to kind of speed things up.
Yeah. And so let's specifically talk about, Dale, some of the things, when should I be validating my network?
Yeah, so it's good to validate a network when you have a brand new environment coming up, or in our case, a lot of times a new store or a new
Mm-hmm.
corporate office location. So you have an idea of basically it's to when you have your predictive design, so you can fine tune some of those things as far as like attenuation objects. So the wall, how much loss do you get through a wall? There's a general amount of loss, but suppose the drywall we use in our locations, it differs from that general amount of loss. So you want to fine tune that, so you can put that into your predictive and account for that. Also, it's good to know which AP with mounting heights work best in your environment,
Mm-hmm.
that give you the best experience. When it comes down to what type of antenna to use, you want to be on site for that, because the predictive design can't quite always tell you what works best out there in the field for real. When you're really out there. When it comes time to plan for an upgrade, whenever you're introducing a refresh, by that, introducing a new type of access point or antenna radio, it's good to get those measurements, make sure that what you have in your simulated predictive design is on par, or as on par as possible with what's actually out there. So really, it's good to be on site, validate things, really getting that data firsthand from that environment, and making sure that it is what you think you had in that predictive design, and then going back and fine tuning it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's funny. Way back when in a previous life, I was working with a retailer, different retailer, Dale, obviously, than the one you work for, but working with a retailer that was doing a upgrade or refresh on several different stores, and it was kind of like a rotating refresh for them. And in several of the stores, they were complaining that it just wasn't working, and there wasn't a pre-site survey or anything done to understand what was happening prior to it. They just did the predictive design and then validate it. And the struggle that they were having was that in certain region of the stores, the general manager had approved basically this new signage, this campaign, and it was basically creating a Faraday cage around the APs. And so it was just this one region and they were struggling. But if they had done the pre-site validation, they would have seen the signage in the stores and understood where that was. So Dale, to your point, AP placement is really, really critical in that, to be able to understand what's happening in a refresh or an upgrade so that you can know what to do, what your limitations are, and understanding that piece.
And it's also great to understand what the environment looks like before you even start planning for the network, right? What
Exactly.
is the leakage of the other Wi-Fi networks from your neighbors, from different tenants, same building, neighboring buildings? What is the not only Wi-Fi, but also non-Wi-Fi interference? DFS condition, can we use all 5 gigahertz channels? You know, you guys in States, you have more channels than we do in Europe. We have just 4. So what is the DFS frequency? How would it affect our network? Is it like super extremely heavy or not? Everything is extremely important before we even start thinking about designing the network. And also it gives us an opportunity to do like a pen and paper. So I like to go on site and have a feeling about the site, to see the site myself, to develop like an understanding of where people are going, what paths are they going to take, how they are going to use the Wi-Fi network. And I will use all this information to do a proper spotless wireless design.
Absolutely.
And Mac, as you mentioned, neighbors, especially in mall environments, you have neighbors left, right, across the corridor, above, below. I mean, those are a lot of things you can't account for or really know, you know, during your predictive design. So you have to actually get out there and see what's actually in the air.
Yeah. Neighbors can be challenging, right?
Yeah.
And I think, and Mac, I think that's a really good point. And also Dale, is if you're doing those refreshes, is understand what problems you're trying to identify and to fix today that are currently in place, right? Is you're going to do a refresh. Okay, well, let's see what's currently going on and understanding it so that we don't make the same choices.
Absolutely.
Again.
I just wanted to emphasize that it's not only about the pre-design survey. We do the data validation pretty much for everything at every step. What I mean by that is, before you start doing a predictive design, you want to go on site to capture things that we have just mentioned. If you have a troubleshooting session, like something is broken, you want to go on site and capture data to understand what is broken and how you can fix that. If you have more challenging environments like warehouses, manufacturing, you know, airports or public spaces, that is difficult to simulate in Ekahau with good certainty, because not everything is super easy to simulate. You should go to the site and do like an AP on a stick survey and collect data by putting an access point, the same model, same type of antenna as you are intending to use in a real design, and do a mini survey around it, then move it to the next position and do a mini survey around it to understand if your predictive model is really accurate. So that's a big mistake. And then after you put the network together, you implement that, it's up and running, then you want to give it like a few days or a week or 2 weeks time, and then you want to come back and do a post-deployment survey to make sure that everything is implemented your way, that all the channel planning, all the RRM stuff, by RRM I mean like the resource management, it's being called differently by different vendors, but channel planning, transmitting power levels, channel widths, that everything is configured as it should be. Do you have tons of overlapping? Do you have tons of other issues or not? You want to understand that after the network is being put in. And lastly, network changes, circumstances change, people change, the applications change. So something that you've designed the network for 2 years ago might not be valid today. You know, you design for a warehouse and then the layout of the racks change. What do you do? What do you do then? Is it going to work? It can, but you don't know, okay? So you are shooting in between the racks, and maybe the racks are in front of your access points now, in front of your directional antennas. You want to validate that. People working in the warehouses, like the IT there, they not always, I don't say that all of them, some of them, they are amazing Wi-Fi engineers, but some of them, they won't care about Wi-Fi antennas. They won't even know what that is sticking out of the wall, and they will just put a rack in front of it. You don't know. So validation surveys are also amazing opportunity to capture good quality data.
You know, Mac, I'm glad you talked about it's not just about pre-deployment. It's about everything there. It's about understanding what's going on. It's about troubleshooting. You know, what happens when you have a code update on your controller? all of those things can, anytime something changes, we should be validating your network. And folks, we know how challenging that is, especially when you're a 2-person team and you have 200 sites. That's not feasible, because all you would be doing is surveying. But, finding a way and finding a solution around that, share your iPad, or share your Sidekick, get, if you have a Connect license, multiple people, you can have people who don't, junior guys doing some surveys, you can do it that way. There's a lot of different options to getting the data, but data is really what makes our world go round, right? It's something that's really critical. But let's get into our next poll question. And we are going to launch that. So let's find out. So we know how often we should do it, but how often do we actually do it is the question, right? There we go, Stu.
Yeah, getting
Thanks.
there.
Yeah.
And while we're waiting there, just to kind of fix things, Dale, do you mind? Oh, never mind. It should be okay. Tawny's able to put the poll question up. That's okay. That works. With that Zoom hiccup, we've got everybody as co-host and host now. So
meh. It's okay.
It's
it all
working.
works out. It's what you do. You're flexible, right?
That's right.
All right. So let's look at that. So, but before, if you guys recall, everyone said you should be doing it quarterly, but we're not doing it quarterly. Right? It's interesting to see what we should do versus what we actually do. That's something that's always quite interesting to me. All right, but let's talk about the really, really fun stuff and get into some of that. So let's talk about doing predictive design and data collection. Mac, why don't you share with us talking about that?
So I have already talked about most of these things. So we want to, before designing Wi-Fi, we want to go to the site. We want to understand what is happening there, neighbors and all this stuff. So the current RF condition, interference, both Wi-Fi and non-Wi-Fi, but wireless in the same band that we are intending to use for our network. DFS, how it affects 5 gigahertz attenuation. So Dale has already discussed that. Mounting limitation. So that's important, very important, because without going to the site, you won't know if something that looks amazingly fine on the floor plan is actually possible to put in a real world. You want to go there and you can see clearly if it's a false ceiling or a concrete ceiling, if it's 2.4 meters high, 5 meters high, or 15 meters high. Can you run a cable there? Is it easy to mount the access points? How about the obstructions around the ceiling at the level of the access point where you intend to put it? Do you have any AC ducts, metal pipes, ceiling joists? Do you want to use a conduit bracket to suspend the access point down, or maybe you want to use a directional antenna and point it down, or maybe you cannot mount access point on the ceiling at all and you want to stick to the wall. So this is very important to understand. And aesthetic. How many times have I been working with architects in listed buildings like museums or stuff where you have your perfect Wi-Fi plan in your head, and then you present a draft version of your design and they say, oh, by the way, out of this 25 access points you've suggested, 24 cannot go where you want it. Okay, so we will have to revisit that. And then you go back on site and then you discuss where we really can do it. And it's very important. And you can use skins on the access points. You can use directionals and hide them somewhere so they are not too visible on the ceiling, this kind of stuff. And the feeling for the site, for me, it's very important. So I go there, I capture data with Ekahau, and I take my pen and paper or iPad and pen, and I start with a pen and paper design that I will then later translate into Ekahau design and validate and so on. So that's pretty much it from this slide.
Awesome.
And Mac, oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Dale.
No, I was just going to say, and Mac, as you mentioned, some of the aesthetic concerns and things like that, especially in some of the retail stores of ours that have a heavy emphasis on the look and feel. Sometimes the access points can be an eyesore. So you do want to try to have that happy compromise where those aren't just standing out and gaining much attention or from the customer, something that they easily can see that stands out. Those are some of the concerns we deal with from my perspective, at least.
Yeah, absolutely. But funnily enough, we are quoting for skins for the access points more often than ever before. So people, they just want them to blend in better. And there are companies out there that can do it for you. They can even put your company logo on the skin. And by putting a skin on the access point instead of painting it, you don't even invalidate your warranty. So
Mhm.
it's doable.
Yeah, there's you know, aesthetics, as we have seen, has become really, really important in deployments. And so some of these companies are doing some amazing things, hiding things in antennas and junction boxes and in the floor, you know, in the wall, in the ceiling, really, really doing some innovative things to
Yeah,
be
some of
able
them,
to
they are
help.
putting access points behind a metal mesh panels, you know, in a
Yeah,
planar.
it's crazy. It's
Yeah.
just crazy to think of some of the things that they can do. Um, but let's talk about specifically the data piece. So as we're looking at collecting the data, Mac, talk to us about what you were doing here.
Yeah, so this is one of my recent clients that I've done predictive design for, but this is a data collection from the site. And you can see that this is just an access point in the middle, but every access point in this facility, and not everything is open space there even, covers entire facility. So the CCI, there are levels of that, it's madness. And even like reducing the transmitting power level, it won't help there too much. But these access points, they were blasting at 100 milliwatts. It was mad. You don't want to have that, because if your access points cover more than you really need or want, then you will contribute towards the CCI, and you don't want it. Because you will increase the contention in your Wi-Fi network, and your airtime utilization will go higher, and the network will be slower. Wi-Fi always works, but it will be slow. So it's a bad idea. Don't blast at full power.
That's you know, it's one of the things that I think that people often overlook, is the power setting of what it is.
Yeah, most people, they leave it on default,
Yeah.
and by default, most of the vendors, they will put it on full power. So, you know, so the exec 100 meters away from the access point will still see a
Mhm.
Wi-Fi signal, you know, 3 bars out of 4, and be happy about that. Doesn't mean that it will be good or working, but it looks better, right?
Well, exactly. 4 bars, 3 or 4 bars means that I have the best coverage in the world, right? That's exactly what that means. That it's going to be perfect.
Yeah, exactly. If you have 3 or 4 bars and 80 megahertz channels and good speed test results in the middle of the night, that's what you want, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You have
And,
to be
and one
careful with that.
and one thing I've seen too with full power is, you know, that increases the likelihood of sticky clients and results in a poor roaming experience too.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's one of the things, understanding what you're seeing on your network. You can't know that until you're actually on site looking at that. You can't know that until you fire up your app, your survey app, and go in and look at it, look at what the data is saying, right? That's the really important piece, is being able to collect it and then translate it into fixing the problem, right?
Absolutely.
All right.
Oh, that's one of my favorites. So this is one of the clients that we've done together with Matt.
Uh-huh.
And look at that. This is just the out of the box, one of our, you know, favorite vendors out there that can do dual 5 gigahertz and has something called like the flexible radio assignment thing that allows dual band 3 radios, APs that can do dual 5 gigahertz with extra radios to assign themselves to radios on 5 gigahertz. And then also it was using the best channel width, best transmitting power levels, best everything. So we are hitting all the boxes from that particular vendor. And that's what we came up with. Okay. So this was not just after putting the Wi-Fi in. We give it like 2 or 3 days, because this was not a live network yet. It was a brand new network, no clients around. We just wanted to see what's going to happen if we put everything on defaults. And that's what happened. And you can see a plethora of different bad things happening there. Not only the CCI will be amazingly bad, but also it was multi-tenancy building with neighbors on top and on the bottom. CCI was through the roof. And I think we can also see some OBSS issues there, where you have overlapping channels with different main channel that is being used for control and management traffic. That can lead to a plethora of different issues. So don't do that. Look at that. This is 46 CCI there. I don't think it requires further comments. And yeah, ACI looks bad as well, as you mentioned in the comments. So I think the best practice here when it comes to channel planning is either do it statically if you have a very challenging environment, like a massive warehouse with 200 APs around, nothing wrong with that, or work with your RRM, and tell it what it can and cannot do. If you specify that it can only work with, let's say, 20 megahertz channels, that you do not allow it to put 2 radios on 5 gigahertz without you knowing about that, because there are certain situations where dual 5 gig would be beneficial. but I think I've been in this situation like once in my life where it was beneficial, where I had to use it. Otherwise, it's you and me, you know, Wi-Fi engineers, that we should be deciding what the controllers use in regards to power levels and channel widths and bands that they are sitting on.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting to think about all of the different kinds of information that we can collect when we're on the network, right? When we're on site doing a survey, doing that collection piece, because you can get everything from channel interference, understanding channel utilization, to the data rates. So talk to us what you collected here.
Okay, so now we are looking at the data rates, and we can clearly see that, let's say, the B is enabled on 2.4. So we have long preamble, which is 1 meg per second on 2.4 gigahertz. Okay, so we allow very, very low data rates. On 5 gigahertz, we have lowest available to us 6 megs per second. And we have to remember that if we set our base data rate too low to something extremely low, like 1 or 6 megs, then all the control and management traffic will be sent using that data rate. Okay, so even if your clients and access point, they can send data very fast, before they send data, there is a protocol overhead that will be sent on that very low base data rates. And good practice here, like a best practice here, is that depends on the vertical and on the use case. But in typical enterprise environment, so most use cases here, we will be using something like 12, or if you fancy something fancier, 24 megabits per second. That will, you know, ensure that the airtime utilization is a little bit lower than when you use 1 or 6 megs. Sometimes you want to use 1 or 6 in a very difficult, challenging environments where your device, you know, they're jumping through the MCS table all the time. They cannot settle on something. You have tons of multipath fading, where you want to ensure that, let's say, handheld scanners, that maybe they are not too capable Wi-Fi devices, that they want to use the Wi-Fi reliably, and they can drop down to something as low as 1 meg. I don't think it's too relevant today. Normally, I wouldn't use that. I haven't been in a situation where I have or had to use 1 or 6 minimum base data rates, but I have heard about the scenarios where it was beneficial to use that. But in typical environment, it's not a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
And it changed us that's so it may seem so small like that, you know, such as the disabling the lower data rates makes a tremendous difference if you have the opportunity to do so. If your devices can support some of those data rates, higher data rates, or data rates that are not so low or legacy. So if you don't have any B clients in your environment, you should definitely disable those lower data rates.
Even if you do.
Yeah, you can even
limit them.
Yeah.
Punish them.
Yeah, exactly. Old
Yeah,
technology.
You'll find out that that light on the wall is not working anymore pretty quick. This is a really good slide because it actually, I think it's telling us a story here where you're collecting that data and you're finding some of those inefficiencies that you can improve on.
Absolutely.
Like,
Finally enough.
Like Mac, you said at the beginning, it's like you can't just leave it at default, right? You need to work with it, right?
This is the default, by the way.
That's right. That is I can see that. That's definitely the default, and this is where you want to kind of make it better.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And I think, you know, one of the things as part of, you know, data collection and the webinars and things that we're doing is looking at what you've got and then what are the next steps from here. Like understanding, okay, I've got the data. What am I going to do with it? What are my next steps? What does this tell me? Right. And so we'll take a look at that in webinars that come up as well. But let's specifically talk about looking at the primary and secondary. Mac.
Okay, so here, this is something that is not often mentioned. Okay, so this is like the OBSS problem, overlapping basic service set, where you have overlapping channels, but with different main channels. Okay, so when you start bonding channels, typically you would use the first channel in the bonded channels to be your main primary channel that will be used to send, to transmit or receive management and control data. Okay, then you check against the CCA, so you check if the channel is being used, if there are different Wi-Fi clients there, And if they are, then you wait, or if you are transmitting, they wait, this kind of stuff. So you are very polite, you understand each other. But if you have OBSS overlapping stuff, like we can see here, channel 56 or 60 at 80 megahertz, then these guys, they will not necessarily be competing for the airtime. They will be talking on top of the other, and they will be contributing to massive retransmissions, massive collisions. It's bad, okay? So primary, secondary OBSS, it might seem like a good idea to set a different primary channel to what your neighbors are using on overlapping channels, but in fact, it's a very bad, very bad idea. I've seen it in like housing environments where people, they were getting some hubs, Wi-Fi routers from the ISPs, and they had it in settings. They could change the primary channel, and all these routers, they were only supporting Uni 1, so channels 36, 40, 44, and 48. And out of the box, they were 80 megahertz. So people, they tried to avoid each other by changing the main primary channel. And they were contributing to even more issues, more retransmissions, and more congestion in the Wi-Fi environment. Best practice here is to never do that, okay? Always stick to the first channel in the bonded channels that you bonded together, and don't change that to anything in the middle or at the end if you don't have to.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's another funny thing. I've very often used to forget about that. So you put a network together, okay, your access points, they are registered to your controllers or to the cloud. You've claimed them, they are online, life is good. You can associate to your Wi-Fi network, and then you decide, okay, I waited for a few hours. I've let it some time for the channels to settle. And then you start walking around, okay, to check if the coverage is there, if the CCI is not too bad, you check everything. And then you realize that some of the access points, that they are not dual 5 gigs, they have like 2 5 gigahertz radios in Ekahau, 108 and 132 channels used, but it's physically not possible. It happens where you don't freeze the RRM, so the dynamic algorithms that can change the channel, okay? And it happened mid-survey. What happens when you don't freeze your RRM to the hours that are outside of the business hours is sometimes you have people associated to your AP. They are happily using the Wi-Fi network in the middle of business hours, important meeting, they are on Wi-Fi and they are on a video conference, okay? And now there is an interference, something happened, like the microwave, whatever, something happened in the background, and your wireless LAN controller has decided that this access point must change channel to avoid the interference, or this access point must change channel to avoid the CCI from a different access point that has changed channel to avoid interference from a non-Wi-Fi source, for example. And then your devices associated to Wi-Fi, they will have like an announcement saying, oh guys, I'm switching channel to something else, or they won't have an announcement. That depends on the vendor and the firmware. And that would, yeah, go on.
Yeah, sorry, I was just interject. I think that definitely depends on the vendor for sure, right? I think is every vendor treats that particular RM DCA a little differently. So it's always good to kind of understand that piece during your data collection for sure. Definitely is looking at channel with the in this case here, the micro and the macro cell on the dual 5 gig radio. But definitely important.
Necessarily, we are not here because this was not X or AP. From that vendor. This was just a channel change mid-survey, okay?
Okay.
So the take from it here, that the best practice for the RRM is to anchor it to an hour that is outside of business hours so it doesn't happen, okay? So let's say how we do it. We anchor the RRM to 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. So it happens maximum twice a day, or to just 6 p.m. or midnight, so it happens once a day, and we do not allow the controller to change channels midday. So people having a conversation on a Wi-Fi network, over the Wi-Fi network, they won't be disconnected or hard dropped from the access point when the channel change happens. And we've seen that tons of times.
In some cases too, I've seen exactly what you mentioned there, Mac, with DFS radar events. During a radar event will occur, and then the AP changes channel and it disrupts the client's connectivity. So that's one of those things. And as you mentioned, RRM, understanding which channels that occurs on and disabling those from being used is a good practice.
Absolutely. There is even more to that. Like even if you have some DFS events happening in your network and you are in the middle of an enterprise environment where you really, really need capacity, if the DFS event happens once a day or twice a day or 5 times a day, you might make an educated decision about keeping these channels. And then you understand that your clients, they might disconnect once or twice or 5 times a day, but you don't create your, a channel contention inside your own network. You are still using DFS channels. However, as you said, Dale, if DFS is very heavy and it constantly knocks off your clients from the network, then probably it's the best idea to disable those channels from the RRM. So the controller cannot assign these channels the access points.
Yeah, and I think that even leads us up to, into another thing here is that interferes, right? Eating up that airtime. I mean, another thing is that you're going to get other devices. You're going to have adjacent Wi-Fi, neighboring things. And of course, in this example here, we've got, video cameras that we've kind of seen where that takes up a lot of time as well. And you're going to see that in your data collection. I mean, so Dale, in some of your experience, I mean, on the retail side, this must be a very kind of this is second nature to you. You must see a lot of interesting things from, it being in such close proximity to other neighbors, right? Like, stores.
Yep. So like highlighted here, video cameras, those are some of the things, whether within our space or from a neighboring space. There may be some stores that have neighboring stores that have electronic devices that do cause a lot of interference that is kind of beyond our control. So it's good to assess which channels we do see that interference on to kind of make sure that we can reduce, if not completely eliminate, some of the likelihood for interference.
And this is a cool feature from Ekahau, by the way. It's not that old yet, where it can take a look at the signature from the spectrum analyzer, recognize what type of device it is based on that signature, and places it on the map for us. It's not like, previously in the past, we will just take a look at the spectrum and we would just see where it was utilized heavily. Then we will just go there and see on what channel, and then we'll take a look at it manually. What is the signature look like? Is it a video camera? Is it something else? And then we'll probably try to find that device and eliminate it, or design around it if we cannot eliminate that. And this just makes our life a little bit easier and more automated.
So let's look at a network that mixes the channel widths.
Oh yeah, so that's another one of my favorites. So never under any circumstance mix the channel widths if you absolutely don't have to. And I've never had to do it in my life. You shouldn't have to be doing it in your lives, guys, because if you start mixing channel widths, and this is just a bad idea because it introduces more overhead. It will trigger CTS, RTS, clear to send, request to send. More data will be transmitted in your Wi-Fi to make sure that there are no collisions from overlapping channels with different channel widths. So this triggers a mechanism that puts more overhead in the air. So it's a bad idea. I would say the rule of thumb is use 40 megahertz until you cannot. So you can see when you go initially to the site, what is the CCI from the neighboring networks, from your own networks, from whatever you have around. And then you can ascertain if 40 megahertz is a practical thing that you can use without excessively increasing your CCI. If it is, then just stick to 20. You cannot go wrong with 20 megahertz. In a house environment, like at home, I have 40 megahertz now because I've improved my broadband to 300 megs, so I wouldn't be able to get that from 20 megahertz channel. But in a corporate environment, it really doesn't matter too much. You don't need, 40 megahertz or 80 megahertz or, God forbid, 160 megahertz channel widths. And also, I want to just quickly jump back to the DFS. I've seen comments from Jacob that if you have DFS activity in one part of the building, it doesn't mean that you will have the same DFS activity on the other part of the building, or same channels are affected throughout entire building. You will have to collect DFS logs around entire building. I know it's not practical when you just have like one data collecting access point that collects DFS logs throughout your survey for like a day or two. You won't be able to understand the DFS condition properly across entire building, big building, multiple floors. You won't know about everything. So you can just capture a trend. But yeah, well spotted, Jacob.
And Mac, here I do have a question actually. So a lot of times I don't do channel bonding on at all. 5 gigahertz. I don't do channel bonding. Usually go with 20 megahertz wide channels. But in as you mentioned, don't mix channel widths. Have you noticed RRM or DCA ever try to do that at all?
Of course, many times.
Okay.
Some vendors are better than the others when it comes to the RRM out of the box, but I've seen multiple times where the channel widths are mixed. Actually, this is this is one of my recent surveys. I think it's from last year, and this was out of the box default settings where client was implementing the network based on our design, and they forgot to do the RRM properly. Okay, so this is the default for us.
So we talked a lot about the different kind of data that we can get from it, but one of the other things that you can do when you're doing your validation or your surveys, your data collection, is looking and seeing where the APs are mounted and seeing some of that information. Dale, you talked about AP placement is really strategic. Mac, obviously, this is not an ideal mounting scenario.
Do you think?
I think it looks pretty good.
That's a reflection nightmare right there. It looks like
Textbook, right? It's textbook placement.
Yeah, it's amazing. Also, before it reaches your client, it gets very nicely reflected from all these metals around. So probably it gives you a better signal strength, right? That's what happened here.
Exactly.
And I think that to put in context is, and I've seen this before, and this is part of planning, right? This is understanding when the access point should be installed, right? It's and in this case here, I could probably determine that the access point was installed before the ducting.
I think what happened, well, I know what happened here because that was one of our surveys we've done with Matt as well. We were validating troubleshooting issues with Wi-Fi before clients, they moved into this beautiful building in central London. And what happened, there were no pre-deployment survey done before the design, okay? This was all desk-based predictive design without the designer ever going to the site. And then the cabling company that was putting the access points in there, they just took the design and mounted the APs in the closest possible spot where they had opening in the ceiling. Okay, so just by looking at it, you can easily say that if you put this access point on the cable tray, it would already have been better. Or you could use a suspended conduit bracket. But this just, validates our claim that you should always, always, always go to the site and take a look what is available for you there to mount against. And if you don't have anything like a cable tray that we do have in this example, you probably would like to suspend it to the level where it's under the level of obstructions from the ceiling.
Mm-hmm. Dale, have you ever?
Oh, yeah, actually, it was surprising before I refreshed just to see how many APs we did have out there similar to this. And then that kind of leads to you creating standards in your documentation for the installing techs or the installer techs that, okay, all APs must be mounted so many inches or whatnot below any HVAC obstructions and things like that. So yeah, this is definitely an example of what we put out there as do not use, an example of a bad mounting technique. Yeah.
Badfi.com.
Exactly. And I think that's, to our point that we were talking about earlier, there's a lot that you can do, not just from an aesthetic point of view, but hanging conduit mounts, dropping it down, the suspended mounts. There's a lot of options in that. But if you are not on site to see it, you don't know that's what is needed there. And so it's really important to make sure that you see the site before you do the design so that you can understand what the limitations are, understanding what the height is. Because if you have to drop it down 6 to 10 feet, that's going to impact your signal as well. So it's really important to make sure you see the site and understand what's happening prior to the predictive design.
Absolutely.
So DFS.
Yeah. So yeah. This is a very nice example from the real survey that we have done with Matt as well. We tend to work together quite a lot. So look at that. That's one of the major vendors on the market in an environment that is hit by DFS heavily. So what it has done using out-of-the-box RRM was to disable pretty much usage of all the channels outside of Uni 1. And it still decided to use a mixture of 40 and 80 megahertz channels. So it's bad, isn't it? It really is awful. for the reasons that we have mentioned, not only like mixed channel widths, but also extremely excessive CCI in an environment like this.
Yeah. So let's specifically talk about validating your predictive design and understanding what that looks like. You know, lugging out all of your equipment. Mac, to your point earlier, and Dale, same thing. You guys were talking about it's really important when you're doing your AP on a stick survey to use the same AP and antenna that you in your survey that you're going to use in your deployment. It doesn't help if it's a different version, a different prototype or product, excuse me, because then you're not going to know if it's going to perform the same.
That's absolutely the case. So this is the example from one of the warehouse designs that you've probably seen before from us, from me and Matt. This is just the AP on a stick, like a typical thing. We were thinking about putting the access points close to the AP on a stick antenna. There is a cable tray 18 meters above the ground. This is mezzanine floor 3, around 18. There we go. Matt is just joining or joined. He probably wants to say something. And so we are using exactly the same model of the antenna that we wanted to use for our design. We are shooting in between the aisles, and we wanted to absolutely check that this antenna with this gain, it was 13 dBi antenna from Cisco, very good antenna, by the way, 2513, I think it was, that it will cover the aisle in between the racks very nicely for us. The aisles, they were very long, like 200 meters long, and very narrow, like 2 meters wide. And you can really simulate that in Ekahau very nicely, but you want to go to the site and you want to validate that it's indeed going to work as intended in this specific environment. And that's exactly what we have done.
Mm-hmm.
And it's good to use to bring along different antenna types, just in case the type you think might be ideal for it is not quite ideal. So you can test that out and compare, see like, okay, well, maybe this other type of external antenna or even internal antenna is better for this particular use case or area.
Yeah, very good question from Michael. Why to use AP on a stick without product in the rack? We don't have the luxury of designing Wi-Fi network for a warehouse that is fully in use. That's the first answer, and the second answer is if you can shoot in between the aisles very nicely without anything on the racks, you cover something that is clear line of sight between your antenna and your potential scanners. So stuff put on the racks, it can affect how Wi-Fi will propagate, but we are not shooting onto the rack. We are shooting in between the racks, so it shouldn't matter too much.
Yeah. And sometimes, Mac, to your point, you don't get into a warehouse that has everything in there, but understanding seasonality in some ways in warehouses, it has to work whether there's product on the shelf or not, right? And so you have to have a design that's not going to break with or without product on the shelf.
Absolutely, that's the case. So what we are doing here, we are putting enough access points and antennas that will cover entire warehouse with racks fully stocked with very heavy attenuators. And then what happens if they're empty in some areas of the warehouse? If we know that they're going to be empty for a long time, we will simply disable like every second access point in that area, or we will disable 2 access points and then just leave 1 up and running, this kind of stuff. We didn't have to do that in this scenario, but you can do it. You can disable APs in not as densely used areas with no stuff on the racks if you want to.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So let's look at what we do see.
Yeah, so also we wanted to check how down tilt would affect the propagation of a signal from our massive antennas in this particular warehouse. And you can see that 20 degrees tilt, so not as a massive tilt, like 20 degrees shooting there, will cover entire aisle very, very strongly, like all things considered, 200 meters, it's very good. If you put it 30 degrees down, you will see that you will have better coverage, like directly under the antenna at the beginning of the racks of the aisles, but towards the end, the signal can be a little bit spotty. So if you want to cover like an area under the antenna from 18 meters high access point, antenna mounted 18 meters high above the ground, with 30 degrees tilt, probably you would need to have antennas on both ends. And you wouldn't know that with just doing a simulation. Simulation is extremely good, as you will see in a next slide. So if we switch to the next one, here we will be validating the predictive versus pre-deployment versus the validation. So first, we've done the simulation in Ekahau, then we've done the APoaS stick in Ekahau with the access point and antenna that we intended to use in this mezzanine. It was 2566, something like 6.5 dBi gain antenna from Cisco, and then the validation survey after we mounted it on a suspended bracket properly, and we just wanted to check what is the difference between the predictive versus APoaS stick versus the real one on the next slide.
You know, before we go to the next slide, one of the things, you know, I was having a conversation with someone and we were talking about, they were telling me that their antenna wasn't working, the antenna that they had purchased. And turns out that when they were doing their APoaS stick survey, they did not stage the AP at the height they did in their predictive design. So they were getting a very, very different result. And so making sure that that's one of the things when you're doing your APoaS stick, make sure you stage the AP at the height you have it specified in your design.
Extremely important. In the same location as you intend to put the access point with the same antenna, same tilt, same power levels, same everything.
Yes, absolutely.
And look at that. Isn't it like funny and joy to look at? Predictive design, it looks pretty much the same as the APoaS stick and the validation. So I guess we, in this example, we didn't need to do any adjustments, any changes. So predictive design would work on this mezzanine with patch antennas shooting down, creating cones of coverage. It worked amazingly, but it's so nice to see that it matches up.
Yeah, absolutely. A couple quick questions from folks. You know, people asking about APoaS stick kits and things like that. Wi-Fi Stand does a great job. There are several others. There are several others utilizing external or enclosures for APs. Oberon, yes, does a great job. Oberon, Ventive, Exceltex all do have enclosures, NEMA enclosures, you know, ceiling tile enclosures, lots of different options for you. So if you're looking at that specifically, there are a lot of companies who do that and do it very well. And
especially on the battery side as well.
Yeah.
On the battery, because you're going to need constant power for those APs that you're using for sure.
Yeah, we have our favorite battery that can last with a single radio on like 10 hours, 12 hours with a beefy Cisco access point. We were positively shocked about what batteries can do today with Matt. It was amazing.
Yeah, they outlast the surveyor.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, folks, you know, we're getting to the end here. You know, understanding not all environments are created equal. Make sure you see what's happening. Mac, any final thoughts for you?
Well, nothing that we haven't mentioned. So I just wanted to reiterate how important it is to capture the real data from the site that you're either designing for or troubleshooting or upgrading, updating, or, you know, periodically check what is happening there. Every time good data capture, consistent, is extremely important. Just one thing from my perspective, from my experience, capturing data with different devices gives you different levels of sleekness. Okay, so I still remember the good old days with, you know, 6 dongles sticking out of my massive laptop, and after starting to survey with an iPad and with a Sidekick, I would never go back. And the funny thing is that before doing the surveys, data capturing with iPad and a Sidekick, I didn't even know I needed it. Okay, so people, they don't know what they want until they try it out, and then they will never go back. So that's an important thing. Another important thing is sometimes we survey areas where you don't have any points that you would use for locating yourself, like a massive open space in a warehouse with no racks where you just want to capture RF data, but there are no doors, no columns on the map, and it's very difficult for you to locate yourself. Or you go outside and you do a part of the outdoor survey around the building, not too many points which you could use to locate yourself. Autopilot is extremely amazing, especially with the LiDAR on. Okay, it makes a massive difference. If you use an iPad or an iPhone that has no LiDAR on, so older versions, it's not as good as with the newest iPads and iPhones. iPhone 12 and iPad from 2020 and newer, iPad Pro. They are so amazing that we've done 2 kilometers walk and I didn't have to adjust my my position once. I was so shocked by that and I wanted to cry from happiness. So it can happen. Okay. Last year, I thought autopilot is kind of a gimmick-ish thing, but this year I've completely changed my mind and the LiDAR changes a lot. And that's it from me. Thank you.
Well, good. Thank you, Mac. We couldn't have said it better ourselves. We appreciate that. Dale, what
Yes.
about you? Final
Yeah.
thoughts, things to leave everybody
Yeah,
with?
so just to reiterate too, the importance of data collection, getting to know your environment so that you can make sure you have that proper infrastructure or WLAN to support the need of all the business critical applications. Enterprise environments, retail environments, anything with business, it's a lot different than home Wi-Fi. There's roaming involved. There's a lot of you have a lot of clients all in one area, which you typically might not have at home. High bandwidth applications and things like that. So it's important to collect the data, understand your environment, know how to shape it based on that information so that going forward, you have a good standard and baseline for success.
I think that's having a good baseline, having a good standard. I think that is a really critical thing, especially in an environment like yours, Dale, where you've got multiple stores, multiple locations, and you have to create that success and duplicate it over and over again. It's really important in that, and being able to collect data and see your environment and understand that really is critical to that. Stu, what about you? Any final thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's definitely is, the data collection is try to know your environment as best as you can, right? Is understand what are you going to be walking, what are you designing for? Understand, like, do some recon, understand the complexities, understand the people movement, understand, was there an issue that we're trying to solve, yesterday, and do we make sure we don't fall into those pitfalls for tomorrow, right? And so data collection is really important in understanding what's really happening with the current state, so to speak, get that current state, and then walk into okay, here's our future state.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you, Mac and Dale, for joining us. We really appreciate it. Love getting folks on here. Dale, we didn't have your Twitter on there, but if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Mac and Dale, we're volunteering them. They will, if you have any questions, please.
Even
feel
if you don't
free.
have any questions, still reach out. We'd like to talk.
Yes. Or if you just want to chat about it, please feel free to reach out. And thank you everyone for joining us today and taking time out of your day to spend some time with us. And with that, I'm Tani.
And I'm your sidekicks too.
And I'm your bartender, Mac.
Yeah, Mac has the most important role. That's
Yeah,
all I'm saying.
sessions like this, they make me feel like having a cold beer from my fridge right now.
Exactly, right? Oh my gosh.